Hello, and welcome to this February town hall meeting of the Catholic Prison Ministry Coalition. Today, we're really pleased to have with us two representatives of the Frederick Douglass Project. This is an initiative that helps bring people from the outside into the inside of prisons in a way to encourage people to be aware of what goes on inside of prisons, and also to help all of us humanize a system that can very often be rather inhuman. As you're watching today, if you have any questions for our speakers, please jot them down in the chat feature of your on your screen, and then I will relay them to our speakers, who I'd like to introduce now. First of all, I'm George Williams. I'm on the board of Catholic Prison Ministry Coalition. I'm also the chaplain at San Quentin Rehabilitation Center in California. So our speakers today, we have, where'd she go? Julia Reinach. Julia is a recent graduate of the University of Michigan. She has a BA in History and Sociology and a minor in Crime and Justice. And while at Michigan, she wrote her undergraduate honors thesis called Other People's Children, Conditions of Confinement at the Wayne County Juvenile Detention Facility. And she explored the history of juvenile incarceration in Detroit. She also served as the undergraduate research lead for the Carceral State Project, with specific emphasis on prison uprisings and prison resistance. She's worked as a research assistant for the University of Michigan's Policing and Social Justice History Lab, and they track incidents of police brutality and wrongful convictions. And in addition to her role as a program associate at the Douglass Project, Julia works as the executive assistant to Mark Howard and as a general project coordinator at the Georgetown University Prisons and Justice Initiative. I'd also like to introduce Alessandra Rose, who is a travel companion with America Magazine to the Holy Land a few years ago. In addition to working at America Magazine, Alessandra is the administrative director for the Douglass Project. And she works with the board, with funders and leadership team to promote the organization's message of shared humanity. Alessandra's worked closely on a variety of projects and programs with the Osborne Association, the Prisoner Reentry Institute at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York, the Reentry Acceleration Program of the Tamer Center at Columbia Business School, Artistic Noise and Resilience Education, all leading nonprofit providers of services for the incarcerated and the formerly incarcerated. She's also served previously as the executive director at Our Children, that's HOUR Children, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting incarcerated and formerly incarcerated women and their children. And she has also served as the director of the Children's Center at the Bedford Hills Correctional Facility, which is a renowned program that provides innovative and comprehensive family service programs for incarcerated women and their children. Finally, Alessandra holds a BA from Wellesley College and an MBA from the Darden School of Business at the University of Virginia. So both of you bring a wealth of experience and talent to this really important project to humanize our carceral system by bringing people from the outside in, and also in a way that brings the people from the inside out so they have a chance to interact with people. So Julie, would you like to tell us more about your project?
Yes, thank you so much, Father George Williams, for all of that. And also thank you so much, Catholic Prison Ministries Coalition, for having us today. We're really excited to talk to you a little bit more about the Douglass Project. And yeah, so I will go ahead and share a little presentation that we've put together. And in general, what we kind of plan to do is take about 30 minutes of your time today, at least for our presentation, and I'll do a little bit of the introduction, talking a little bit about our project, and then I'll toss it over to Alessandra to talk specifically about how ministries and parishioners can get involved in this mission and in this work. So as you guys have all heard, we are the Frederick Douglass Project for Justice. We officially launched in 2020. We started unofficially in 2019, and we are a nonprofit. We were founded and created by Professor Mark Howard at Georgetown University. And to tell a little bit about Mark's story, he unfortunately could not be here today because he is in Texas at prison release for one of his other organizations, Making an Exoneree, where undergraduate students at Georgetown University reinvestigate cases of likely wrongful conviction and advocate for the release or full exoneration of their program participant through the creation of documentaries. So Right now that he is out of prison release for our 12th release over the past, I guess 7 years now. So yeah, we've taken about 40 cases since the founding of that project in 2018, and we've had about a 29% release rate, which is really, really exciting. And this year we took on 16 cases across 4 universities. So he is very busy inside of prison right now and is very sad to have missed this. But if you have any questions for him, I can provide his contact information at the end as well. So the mission of the Douglas Project, we facilitate structured meetings and respectful conversations between members of free society and incarcerated individuals so that they can learn from each other, form powerful human connections, and transform both their own lives and society at large. And the way that we do this is we have this theory of change. So as many of you are probably aware, 95% of incarcerated people will eventually return to society. However, there are harmful public perceptions that perpetuate stigma and undermine many opportunities for stability upon release. And so our theory at the Douglas Project is that involving the outside community and bringing them inside prisons to talk to people who are incarcerated will allow these face-to-face meetings to build hopefulness, promote pro-social behaviors, foster self-awareness, and ultimately create more humanity in a system that is intended to dehumanize those who are incarcerated. And I will get into it a bit later about how we specifically do this and what our programs look like, what the 2-hour model can do, and kind of some of our results that we've had unofficially. But I really want to emphasize that the Douglas Project is focused on highlighting the shared humanity among a diverse group of participants, and that Mark Howard has a number of different organizations that he works with, some of which are focused on educations in jail, some of which are wrongful convictions. And at Douglas Project, we talk to anyone who is incarcerated. We leave it up to the facilities themselves who can participate in our programs, but in general, we do not ask about people's crimes that they've committed. We don't ask about how long they have left. And it's really about seeing people for people without these labels that society produces a lot of the time. And in theory, and what we have been seeing and are hoping to create are these outcomes, such as potentially decreased recidivism, more stable families, safer communities, fewer disciplinary infractions and lower prison violence, and most importantly, an increased understanding and greater empathy among external participants for those who are impacted by the justice system. And again, I will talk a little bit later about how we're measuring these results and how we're quantitatively, seeing the impacts of our program. But again, I really want to emphasize that it's about shared humanity and empathy and dignity for those who are incarcerated. As I've said a number of times, we think that this program can also contribute to a palpable shift in culture and perceptions in general about the American criminal legal system, because our goal ultimately is a justice system that is more rehabilitative rather than punitive, more equitable, and one that can also build hopefulness and optimism among those who are incarcerated. As a nonprofit, like I mentioned, we thrive off of donations and our wonderful board who helps us to grow and to expand our vision and impact. And a number of our board members are themselves justice impacted. Martin Tankleff, one of Mark's childhood best friends, was wrongfully convicted for over 2 decades for the murder of his parents. He did not commit that murder and has been released. But a number of our board members, again, like I mentioned, have been justice impacted. Or who are really doing this work. Sister Helen Prigine, Dr. Carmel Norris, Jason Flom, everyone here has been helping us to really grow and expand over the past 5 years since our
I just
inception.
want to chime in. Sister Helen has been involved really since the very early days, helping to shape the mission and the vision and the way that the program is implemented across the country. So she's been a wonderful partner and advocate for this work.
Totally. And so the Douglas Project is a national organization. We are currently operating in 20 sites across 14 states, with multiple more states coming soon. Even over the past, 3 days, we've had a number of states demonstrate their interest. We recently presented this past weekend at the National Sheriff's Association conference in Washington, D.C., with one of our partners in Michigan and one of our partners in Massachusetts. And we were met with a number of sheriffs who were interested in bringing this program into their jails across the country, including one in Arlington, Virginia. So for those of you who are DC based, in addition to operating in the DC jail, we would operate in Virginia. But we are also close to operating in Texas, Washington, Indiana. And yeah, so we currently operate in 14 states with one virtual site in Colorado. So if an in-person visit for you or your ministry or your practitioners wouldn't work, we do have these virtual options that will start occurring on Monday nights. And those men inside at Bent County Correctional Facility have been there since the beginning, since our founding. They are absolute experts in our program. They lead the visits better than anyone I know. And they are so qualified and amazing and wonderful humans, and everyone should have the opportunity to meet with them and learn from them. So as I mentioned, since we started, we have had over 3,700 outside participants from across the country and across the world come in and participate in our programs. We have had close to 720 inside participants. So those are people who are incarcerated across the country. We have had over 380 visit sessions. This was created a few weeks ago, these numbers, and even still, we've had 3 or 4 sessions a week. So it's just consistently increasing, and which puts us at probably over 970 hours of conversation at this point. So close to, 1,000 hours that people have spent talking to incarcerated people in a way that maybe they wouldn't have ever considered before. So I wanted to show a few photos from some of these visits and what they look like, and then I will dive into kind of what the model looks like and how we actually go about doing and hosting these visits. As you can see, people are always smiling, people are mixed up, so incarcerated people are sitting next to people from the free world, everything like that. People are sharing ice cream, as you can see in the lower picture. This actually takes place in Michigan, in the jail in Genesee County, so in Flint. And at the end of the sessions, everyone gets to share ice cream. In some states like Massachusetts and in Chicago as well, so Illinois, dinner is served or lunch is served, and they are often cooked by the culinary programs in those jails or in those prisons. So it's a really amazing opportunity to kind of break bread with one another and to sit in a larger circle and just get to know one another. So we always start our programs in a large group circle. We do these introduction questions. We then break into smaller groups, and then we come back together at the end for general reflections, once again as a large group. And so you might be wondering, what do these questions look like? How do we ensure that they remain respectful? How do we ensure that people understand that, coming in with this fear or this feeling of uncertainty is totally natural, because sharing things about your life and sharing your story to complete strangers for 2 hours, no matter whether they're incarcerated or not, can be nerve-wracking. So we have worked to develop a kind of curriculum that allows both outside participants and inside participants to feel comfortable. So anytime that people participate in a session, they're given one of these handouts, which has the session goals and these background questions. We always start with your first name and where are you from? And then we kind of do another icebreaker question. So in this one that you see here, it's what movie has the best soundtrack? And this really lets people loosen up, hear from everyone in the room, because for the next hour, so that takes about 30 minutes, for the next hour, they'll be broken into smaller groups. So almost if you're in a Zoom, into Zoom breakout rooms. And within these small group discussion questions, we always pose 3 to 4, such as what advice would you give your younger self, or who inspires you? And we often say that these can just be a starting point. They don't need to be, you don't need to limit your conversation to these questions at all. But we find that when people start with these, they often, connect and spiral into other conversations. And by the time the hour is up, no one wants to stop their conversations. They're full of laughter. Everyone feels super comfortable with each other. And whatever, fears or uncertainty people came in with, both on inside participants and our outside participants side, we find that those kind of walls have been let down, and people just continue wanting to share about their lives with one another.
I want to just chime in for 1 second. So part of the arrangement that we have with the facilities that we run the program in is that the inside participants aren't censored or penalized for the things they share. So they really are able to tell the outside folks what it is that they want to tell them. And as Julia said, these questions are really springboards for larger, more organic conversations. And I'm always astounded when I join one of these sessions, how the conversation varies from, what ingredients do you absolutely need in the best spaghetti sauce, to what are the impacts of solitary confinement or the impacts of extended incarceration on somebody's children or family. So the conversations, we always say, give us an opportunity to make new friends and learn from people whose life experiences have been completely different from our own. And that goes for both sides. It's not just the outside folks, it's the inside people as well.
Totally. And something that we always hear, or that we hear a number of times, is that people will leave the visit, whether incarcerated or non-incarcerated, and they'll say, oh, it felt like I was in a different place. It didn't feel like I was in a jail I was in a prison. It felt like I was out to dinner with my friends, or I was, sitting at a restaurant talking to them. So we always think that, these questions are really good launch points, but people always just end up talking as if they're old friends. And then we come back together for the last 30 minutes to talk about larger reflections, including questions such as one thing I have in common with someone I met today, my mind was changed about, and most importantly, and a new addition that we are really loving the responses that we're getting include what will you take with you from today and how will you use what you've learned to create change in your own communities, in your own lives, in whatever way that might look for you. And this allows people to kind of not only reflect for themselves on what they just experienced, but also share out with other smaller groups about like what was talked about in their discussion. Like Alessandra mentioned, maybe one group spent a lot of time talking about family recipes that were really important to them, and they can share about those messages and that compassion that they felt, where one other group spent a lot of time talking about conditions of confinement, and they can share about what they learned. And it allows everyone to really benefit from the smaller group discussions and that learning that we had. Before we get into kind of testimonials and some of the data and like talking about the benefits of our program, I also wanted to talk a little bit more about what our model looks like across the country. We are a small nonprofit, or relatively small nonprofit, with a core staff that is located across the country. And so while we can't always personally attend all of the visits, we rely heavily on the returning citizen networks in all of the communities that we are engaged in. And so we have what we call community ambassadors, who then lead the visits themselves, who are trained in our model, who are contractors for our nonprofit, and they go inside and they lead the visits. And it's a really important way for us to kind of engage with the community that we are operating in, while also ensuring that there's like a mutual benefit for everyone. Yeah, so I wanted to talk a little bit about the success of this program, but also how it really impacts people, because we think that this program is really special and it has a really tangible benefit for people, especially to learn about other people. But there's a really big benefit for everyone. And so this data is specifically coming from our participants in the Middlesex County Jail in Middlesex County, Massachusetts. That was a jail that we recently started operating in, so 2023. And we have had tremendous success there. And this quote on like the top left and the bottom left are both from people, the outside participants, who will go inside and then leave and go back to their families, go back to their jobs, everything like that, and take with them what they've learned. And one story that we always like to tell is that one time there was this group of people who came into Middlesex County Jail, and they were from an advocacy group, and they came in with big frowns on their faces. And the sheriff always tells the story that they came in, they were already mad about what they were going to see. They were skeptical about what the conditions would look like. And they seemed already angry. Like they seemed like they had this preconceived notion about what everyone was going to look like and how they were going to be treated. And the next day, they emailed the sheriff this glowing email about how this program had impacted them, had changed their perceptions, had really encouraged them to get engaged. And since then, they have been working in tandem, this advocacy group, with the sheriff's office to develop better programming, to develop more educational opportunities for those who are incarcerated, and it really, taking their messages hand in hand. So this bottom quote is from them. Thank you so much for opening up the walls of Middlesex, allowing us to gain invaluable insight into the justice system. And, kind of, it speaks to this partnership between us and the facilities, where we're able to become a new kind of rehabilitative programming, but it also shows outside participants what is operating in their communities already. Similarly, we have quotes from these inside participants, where people often say that participation in this Douglas Project visit makes them feel like they can talk to people. It gives them hope for their return as a normal person, quote unquote, in the future. Additionally, you kind of people reflect that they're laying themselves open. That's kind of how you recognize each other. Those are things that everyone should take home with us and they can take home. And that's really what helps us all to feel our shared humanity. And we couldn't agree more. And we also have conducted surveys of both inside participants and outside participants about the impact of this program. So I will start with talking a little bit about the surveys that we do of our incarcerated participants, so our inside participants, and how this program has impacted them. And then I'll talk a little bit more about the tangible benefits for those who are outside participants. First, we always thought when creating this program that it would help people feel more confident, more comfortable in their own skills, make them feel more like a human being. But to see these numbers and to see the surveys and the responses has just been overwhelming for us and really affirming of our mission. And so kind of as you can see here from some of this data that was conducted in a study that we did, I believe in like 2023, of all of our inside participants at the time, which has since ballooned in numbers. We have grown to like 7 or 8 states since we took this last survey. But you can see that, you know, a majority of the people feel as though this program has helped them develop their public speaking skills. It has helped them feel more confident in themselves. It has helped them appreciate or consider different perspectives. And importantly for the facility, it's helped them, you know, become greater involved in the community, in the prison or jail that they are housed in. And it has also helped them to feel more comfortable telling their own story and speaking out for themselves and speaking about their own experience. From the outside participant perspective, we are working currently with researchers at the University of Texas, Austin, and also Notre Dame to create a survey that talks about people's perceptions of the criminal justice system prior to going inside with the Douglas Project and after their visit. So we ask questions such as, how did this visit impact you? Kind of how did it change your thinking on certain things? And then we ask like specific targeted questions about like, did they know about this before or after? And we also have created a number of resource sheets that go out to the outside participants in a follow-up email that create or that give them a number of resources to get involved in their own communities, whether those are reentry networks, nonprofits similar to us, where people can volunteer their time or donate, other ways to get involved in the legal system. And we found those to be really important for outside participants who leave the visit feeling like they want to do something, they want to get engaged, they want to continue to spread this mission, but don't know how. And that is something that we've recently developed and we think is really effective. And we're excited to continue with that. And again, we just have like another quote here and another photo. This is inside the DC jail. You can see how everyone is sitting in a circle, talking, everyone is interspersed, those handouts, everyone just, you can see it feels a little bit more relaxed and comfortable. And again, one of our quotes, I'm always amazed at how complete strangers can engage in meaningful, unconditional dialogue, and that this dialogue can then change perceptions, thought processes, and ultimately outcomes. And that's our main goal throughout all of this. Yeah, and I think I want to toss it over to Alessandra at this point to talk specifically about anything I left out and also connected to kind of ministries.
Sure. So if you all indulge me for a minute, I just want to tell you, I've been doing this work for, gosh, at this point, probably 25 years. And early in that experience, I was inside Bedford Hills, which is New York State's only maximum security prison for women. And the women invited me to a poetry slam, and it happened to be during Holy Week. And I was always drawn to this work, certainly because of Jesus's charge to minister to the incarcerated. And I assume that part of why he asked that of all of us was because it's hard to be incarcerated. It's hard to be separated from your family. And then I went to this poetry slam and I thought, wow, these women have suffered so much before they even got to the point of having justice involvement and being incarcerated. And at that moment, it became very clear to me why we're called to do this kind of work and why it's so important. The other thing that I wanted to push on a little is when Julia had talked about the hopefulness. If you look at recidivism and deterrence to success post-release, it's a lack of hopefulness or optimism or certainty about their ability to succeed that really undermines formerly incarcerated people upon release. And we have heard over and over again from the inside folks that joining these sessions gives them a feeling of hopefulness that they had not had before and helps nurture that. And, 2025 is the Jubilee year. The Holy Fathers asked us to reflect on will be pilgrims of hope. This is one of the best ways to actually live out that charge. As Julia said, we have programs across the country in person. We also have a virtual opportunity, which accommodates people who aren't physically located close to one of our in-person sites. But it is an incredibly powerful experience. And I always say, which sort of astounds people, but if you all, working in this space or volunteering in this space will understand, the Holy Spirit is so powerful inside these prisons. It's really overwhelming. And we're very delighted to have church groups in. We work closely with, for example, Holy Trinity in Washington, D.C. They participate virtually, and they also bring groups of parishioners inside the D.C. jail. Typically, what we'll do for them is pick a date, and they bring the entire group in on that date so that they can have some conversation before, experience the visit, and then have some conversation afterwards, and ultimately have some involvement in other ministries that help support this cause and this work. So that's a real opportunity for parishes, as I said, particularly this year is a way to sort of bring the spirit of the Jubilee to all of our different parishes. It's really a unique opportunity, and one that we will be delighted to work with you all and your parishes and individually to help realize. So that's sort of my 2 cents on the sort of the more detailed faith-based opportunity. I'm wondering if there are any questions or anything that you wanted us to address that we haven't yet.
One thing that, as you're speaking, I'm wondering, in your sessions, do you engage the staff in any way, or do you have conversations with the staff?
Yeah, I mean, I can start answering and then I'll toss it over to you. I think we definitely engage the staff in the planning of the visits, and we definitely engage with them in some sites more than others. Some sites have tours of the facility in a way that shows the outside community what is going on inside the facility and allows them to really see the educational opportunities or rehabilitative programs that are there. And so in that way, sometimes outside participants can engage with the staff, see like the teachers that are there or the correctional officers. Other facilities less so, just because that's the model that they wanted to work with, and we respect that. But I don't know if I'm forgetting anything.
For some of the inside folks, having the staff closely involved in the conversation sessions feels a little uncomfortable. So we ask them, they have to be there. Most facilities will say we have to have a CO or whatever in there, but we don't invite them part of the original conversation because we just want the inside folks to have a platform to speak uninhibitedly and openly. And as I said, it's kind of a deal breaker for us. The facilities that censor or that are punitive in any way to somebody who may say something negative about their experience, we don't work in, because that's sort of part of the deal. That said, we've this year for the first time, we surveyed wardens and some of the leadership in the facilities in which we're in, and they have to be clear, we're in 20 sites in 14 states. We've never lost a facility. In fact, I feel like every time we open our email, there's another request from another site that says, I heard about this program. Can you bring it to my site? It really, they've noticed enormous leadership developments in the inside participant population, much greater receptivity to the betterment programs that exist there because of the hopefulness that I referenced earlier. And we feel good about the way the program has been received by facility administration and even sort of on the tactical level with the COs. So that's important. I will say that there's a lot of sites that are we've been working with the community and the law enforcement in the community to have them experience this. In Middlesex, as Julia referenced, it's a pretty progressive jail. The sheriff there is very interested and focused on rehabilitation rather than punitive. And we were working with the chief of police in the local community to make this experience part of the training, sensitivity training program, if you will, for all of the community patrol officers, which really is a win-win because the folks on the inside don't typically have great thoughts about cops. And so to be able to bring police and incarcerated people together, leave the titles, the credentials, the badges, the uniforms behind, and really talk about who they are as people has been transformative for both sides. Connecticut is now requiring this as part of the onboarding for every probation officer in their system. And it's also made it part of the in-service training opportunities for their existing probation officers. And we're seeing that sort of across all over the place. We have a proposal in at their request to the Ohio legislature to create this, we're in 2 sites in Ohio now, but to bring it to an additional 8 because they're noticing that the impact on their inmate population is so strong, so positive.
Somebody is asking how they can establish virtual visits where they are. Do you have a process for engaging people that way?
Do you want to answer that, Julie? You want me to?
Sure. So to get involved in one of our virtual sites, all of our virtual visits occur with one facility, which is in Benton County, or in Los Animas, Colorado, but Benton County Correctional Facility. And to get yourself involved or your community involved, we have on our website a page where you can sign up and indicate whether you're a part of a group or not. And that way we can work with you to either assign you to a date that already exists or to create a visit date with your group in mind for some time that all of you can go and hop on this Zoom and do this 2-hour meeting with the incarcerated men in Bend. Yeah, there's for some sites have certain paperwork that others don't. In the virtual site, there is like a small packet of paperwork like to sign. But other than that, it's all on our website. You can get involved there and indicate which site you're interested in, whether it's virtual or in any of our other 14 states.
I just to second what Julia said. So the virtual site is hosted at one facility. We launched it with that facility during COVID as sort of a workaround of the fact that we couldn't physically get in person in the prisons. And our intention originally was to eliminate the virtual program once we were active in person. But we realized that it's a lifeline for the men who participate because that facility is in the middle of literally nowheresville, Colorado. There's a couple of folks in there who this is the first outside conversation they've had with somebody not part of the prison in 18 plus years. And it also allows people from all over the place to participate regardless of where they're located. So that's definitely a part of the model. I'll tell you though, when we talk about, do we bring the virtual program to other sites, the practical answer to that is not really, because there are very few facilities that have the kind of technology that's required to deliver the virtual program, as well as the bench source that we have. And one of the unique pieces of each facility, as Julia said, is that there's a tour of the facility. And I hate to use the word tour because it's not like, come on into the zoo. It's really an opportunity to see how somebody who's incarcerated lives there. It includes the housing units, usually education units, the vocational programs, the training program areas, the mess halls, just to give people a sense of what the reality of that experience is. So it almost doesn't matter, the virtual site. We're not able to do a tour as part of the virtual visit. It's just not logistically possible. So having a virtual site, multiple virtual sites, doesn't give us that much more than just picking one site and focusing on that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, somebody wants to know, do you provide any incentives for folks inside the facility to get them to participate?
They don't need incentives. They are so eager for the opportunity to share their stories. We have always felt that criminal justice reform is best originated by the people who are directly impacted, but people who are impacted have almost no platform from which to share their ideas, their thoughts. So this gives them that. So we haven't needed a specific incentive. It's a fully volunteer program. Just about every facility has hundreds and hundreds of people long wait list, which has been a challenge. Like, how do we rotate people in and out so we can give more people the opportunity for this? That said, we often provide meals. We have parties at the end of around Christmas time, and we bring in food for the people that have participated. Prison food is kind of crummy. So when we're able to bring in Dairy Queen or pizza, that's really a lovely way for us to celebrate and also thank them for their willingness to be involved. And we do that.
Mhm. I'm wondering, a lot of people watching this or might be thinking, well, I'd like to do something like this in my facility if they're already working one, for example. What would you say? What are some of like the do's and don'ts in terms of getting started with something like this for people who may not necessarily go through you, but might want to start something local?
Julia, do you want to share that? Do you want me to respond?
Maybe I'll have you respond and I'll think of something too.
Sure. So we have a set model, and anything that's branded the Douglas Project follows our model. And that's important because we have relationships with facility administrations that are trusted and long time developed. And we want them to feel confident that the program that we would bring in, adheres to certain expectations and sort of guidelines. But we have found that going directly to the program or the chaplain's office is a good way to enter a new site. Some of the criteria we use in evaluating which sites would be good spots for us is very basic proximity to an urban area. The model we have allows people to come inside the facility just once. If it was more, there would be a significantly more involved security clearance process that a lot of people don't have the time for. And we found that when you bring people in the first time, their learning and inspiration is so significant, and it's incrementally less each time you come in because you get more accustomed to it. Our visits are limited, typically between 12 and 18 people every time. So depending on the site. So I don't want to use up a very limited number of spots on people who've already had this experience. We'd rather spread it. So that said, facilities that work best for us are facilities that have access or proximity to urban areas where we can constantly sort of create a replenishing group of outside participants. Also, as I said, we really require facilities to allow the inside participants to speak honestly. Prisons in general, jails in general, are not transparent places. It's often uncomfortable for the staff and the leadership to have people coming inside because they feel they're being scrutinized and criticized. But we really require that the inside folks are allowed to talk about what they want to talk about and share what they want to share. And honestly, not all facilities are willing to agree to that. So those are sort of the two primary things that we consider when we think, where do we grow? What other sites would be good for us?
Julia, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think I was just going to add that something that we find to be really successful also is, like Alessandra mentioned, proximity to an urban area, but also access to outreach. And so that's something that we have really, really struggled with, but also have succeeded in. And that like we found a model that works for us about how to reach out to people in the community and how best to engage them in our mission. And so that's something also that like these kinds of visits and these kinds of programs are really successful only if people know about them and are able to hear about them. And so that's something, not only proximity like by physical locations so that they can actually go inside, but also to hear about it and to know about it and have the bandwidth to spread awareness.
Someone wants to know if you have people who repeat from the prisons, or do you try to rotate people through the prison? I guess that would be both residents of the facility and people who come in from the outside.
Yeah, certain facilities have there's like two parts to that question. In terms of the inside participants, so the people who are incarcerated, we kind of let each facility decide how best they want to do that. So in some prisons, since people are there for longer times, their sentences are determined already. We can either do like a cohort model where people do like a 7-month or 8-month thing with us. They do a certain number of visits and they graduate from the program, they get a certificate, and then we kind of rotate in another batch of like 16 incarcerated people. Other facilities like our virtual facility in Bent in Colorado, these guys have been there for years. So it's just kind of a growing number of people who can get slotted in or out, but there's people who are there every week who have been there for 3 years. And that works for us, that works for them. Some of the jails.
So I just want to say, chime in, when we've done research on how many sessions an inside participant has to join in order to benefit from the model, it's we think the sweet spot is around 6. So in order to get all of the benefits, the pro-social opportunity, the feeling of hopefulness, it looks like it's about 6 sessions in order to fully realize that. More is always better. Fewer, even one session is transformative, but the reinforcement is valuable for the inside folks. But as Julia said, it's really at the discretion of the facility. A lot of facilities will remove people from the program for disciplinary infractions. You have to meet certain criteria. That said, facilities have told us this has been an enormous incentive to be good behavior and compliance with facility expectations. So it's been a good management tool, frankly, for them as well.
Yeah, and something we considered when we were, expanding is jails oftentimes by nature have either more turnover, more people going in and out of programs. And so that's kind of another one that we've left up to the discretion of the facility. So whether they only let people into the program who have, 6 months until they're sentenced or whatever, we kind of let each facility do that. In Massachusetts, they have their only like disqualifier is behavior. In Michigan, pretty much anyone who wants to go to these visits can sign up on a sheet of paper, and if they're available on that day, then they go. So that's kind of our model for inside. For outside, we typically do a one visit and kind of like spread the word to 3 other people, and then that's how we operate. Again, in Michigan,
one visit per site. So you could do a virtual, you can do a in-person in any of our different sites. It's one visit per site.
Right. And so, but again, that also depends a little bit on the facilities. Certain ones in Michigan, the model is you come in once, then you can come in a second time only if you bring 3 other people, and then your turn is kind of like done. So that's not typically how we do it, and we share our model. But again, each facility is a little bit different.
I will say too, if people come in on one time, like we have like Holy Trinity, we have a couple of group leaders from Holy Trinity, and they're just cleared to come in over and over again because they bring new cohorts of parishioners each time.
I'm wondering, how do you vet people or collect people from the outside from places that are far away from you? I noticed California is one of your participating states. So if you're not in California, how do you know who from the outside to choose?
We have them go through our application or our like sign up form, and we don't do any vetting of people. Basically, we send paperwork and whatever the facility needs to them, and they do their own background checks or, verifying the identities of the people. But we don't, for like 99%, have any say over who goes in. We don't really know who these individuals are for the most part.
We do a fair bit of research in the market. So,
Yeah.
We go to law enforcement officials, we go to legislators, we go to law schools. We have huge groups of law schools. California, there's a big group from UCLA that come in pretty regularly. And that is a very intentional effort on our part the first 6 months. After that, it sort of becomes a runaway train based on word of mouth. So it takes us a while to get the word out in a particular market, and then people know us and sign up, and we go from there.
So
Yeah,
once someone signs up, what kind of preparation do you give them before they go in for the first time?
Sure. So we have an automated system actually that sends out your emails periodically. So from like a logistical standpoint, they're consistently reminded about the visit, about the details. And in terms of like preparation for outside visitors, we have a video that we share about like training. Mark recorded it a few years ago. For each kind of site, and it talks a little bit about what expectations the facility might have, what the visit will look like, how best to engage in your own conversations, what information to share, what information maybe not to share. So we have participants watch that, and that's about like 25 minutes. We provide everyone with an information sheet on the Department of Corrections in the state that they are visiting. So we have info sheets for every single site created. We provide them with the information on like the dress code and what to wear and where to put your valuables, or can you bring them inside, or what to bring, what not to bring, medications, stuff like that. And that varies by site. So we have email that goes out, has all of that.
We also
And then
have the Douglas Project facilitator is a part of every session. They help run it. And we really go from small group, breakout group to breakout group just to make sure the conversation is flowing, that the conversation is appropriate. That's something we're committed to because we want to, ensure that the quality of the experience is positive for everybody.
And similarly, we also have a training program for our inside participants as well in facilities. And so Mark will travel around and other people on our team will travel to a new facility and kind of do this like 2-hour orientation with people who will be participating and talk to them about our model, talk to them about how to lead sessions, how to redirect conversations, and everything like that. So we have a training model for inside participants as well.
Right. And I'm wondering, you showed us some of the statistics from your surveys, but can you give some examples of how after people have met, they've been able to put this hopefulness into concrete action?
The inside folks or the outside folks? Or both?
The outside folks primarily.
We've had people call us and say, for the first time, I'm going to consider hiring somebody with lived experience. I'd never considered that before, and now I will. Or I'm voting for so-and-so because I believe he's really involved in criminal legal system reform. Or I'm going to volunteer for, an organization that supports kids with incarcerated parents. And those are really the things that we look at. What are the behavior changes in outside participants that are derived from what they've learned and what they've heard in these sessions? As Julia referenced, we're working with the University of Texas and Notre Dame researchers to gather some real research data. We're not really involved in it because they're driving that train, but really studying the impact of this experience on someone's attitude, behavior, decisions. And I'm hoping we'll have good data from that realistically, probably the beginning of next year.
Yeah, I know it's a challenge getting review boards to allow people to work with prisoners, but
it's interesting. The IRB approved the outside participant screening. We don't in the surveys we do with inside participants are much more casual. We create them. We have focus groups with them to gather their input. The most challenging part, honestly, our system, we're working to automate our registration system because we have 20 sites and they all have they want different information from each of the outside participants. They have different forms. They meet at different times. And we put the pre and post survey and the links that we have that are automated. And it's just been challenging trying to make sure that can happen seamlessly and that the researchers can get the data they need without us having to get involved and make anything more complicated.
Mm-hmm. I guess we have time for one more question, and this is actually a two-part question. Have you, in your experience reaching out to various institutions and facilities, worked with private prison corporations and their facilities? And the second part is, have you worked with ICE and detention facilities with migrants?
Julie, you want to take that? You want me to?
Yeah, we have not worked with ICE or immigrant detention centers. I don't think we will. But we do operate in a private prison. That is our virtual facility in Colorado. We have been operating there for a number of years and have developed a relationship with the warden there and are trying to bring this program even further into more of a housing unit type of situation to really improve and expand our program within that facility. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I'll tell you that I've being in this sector a long time, I had really strong feelings about for-profit prisons and private prisons. And I remember when Mark said, well, Core Civic, which is the organization that we work with in Bent, is willing to host our virtual sites, give us the technology that we need in order to make it happen, make the men available. And I was like, seriously, Mark, really, we're going to do that? And he's like, let's try it. And I will say that I have been very pleasantly surprised at the commitment that Core Civic has to creating genuine opportunities for reform through this program at their sites that we haven't always seen in states. I mean, off the record, I've spent a lot of time working with the Department of Corrections in New York. It is a much more punitive approach. There isn't the accountability. Core Civic has shareholders, they have contractee or whatever, the people the state governments that invest in them and that contract them. So they have a greater drive. This is my opinion, a greater drive towards more positive income and more positive outcomes and more robust programming than some estate facilities do. So it's really been very valuable for me to get a realistic sense of what's happening in some of these for-profit prisons. Also, we have found them much more quick to respond. So, as Julia said, they've said to us, "Oh, we'd really like to try to create a Douglas Project residential unit and put all the men that are in these virtual visits to live together, to learn from each other, to develop their leadership skills, and have these virtual visits be the anchor of sort of some of the programming." And that can happen there much more quickly than in a state facility. It took us almost 14 months to get up and running in Connecticut and in Ohio. We get the yes from even the Department of Corrections, but actually getting it launched is so slow. For-profit prisons have just been more responsive. They're just able to turn stuff around more quickly. So I don't have the same feeling that I had originally about for-profit prisons.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks. And I hope we can see you in California at San Quentin one of these days.
Me too. We're in Lancaster. We're in Southern California. So.
All right, well, come up to the Bay Area.
Yeah.
Well,
you can help us, George. You can help us get there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We're kind of running out of time, so I want to just thank you both and for the wonderful work you're doing and for taking the time to share it with us. We're going to put in the chat links some links for people to follow up and find out more about the Frederick Douglass Project for Justice if they want to go online and contact you. So again, thank you to Julia and Alessandra for your presence and for the wonderful work you're doing with the Frederick Douglass Project for Justice. May God continue to bless you in this important work. And we'll see you all next time we meet in our webinar.